Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final session of Wisconsin Trustee Training Week. I'm Jamie Matczak with the Nicoletet Federated Library System. Also with me is Jean from South Central Library System, and Jean has been fielding a lot of your tech and sound issue questions all week. She does a way better job of it than I do, and I'm grateful to have her here. She's done a great job, so can't thank her enough for being here. Also in the introduction, you might have seen a slide where it lists the other library systems besides Nicoletet who are supporting this training week, and they need to be thanked as well. So if you have been enjoying these sessions or have been watching the recordings, please do not just fill out the survey at the end of the sessions. We want you to do that as well, but we also want you to pass along your words, your positive words to your library system, and we want to hear all feedback as well. So if you have any advice or for changes or something different, let them know that as well. So instead of a featured speaker today, we have a panel made up of 3 people who have done a lot of trustee training in Wisconsin. We have Krista Ross from the Southwest Library System in Fenimore. We have Mark Aaron from the Winnifox System in Oshkosh, and we have John Thompson from the Indian Head Federated Library System based in Eau Claire. So here is our format today. Krista, Mark, and John are going to cover the 3 topics you see on your screen, just briefly: the impact of trustees in Wisconsin on our libraries, how Chapter 43 affects libraries, and possible future changes to library systems. These are topics and questions that often come up in trustee training, and I think a lot of us are hearing a lot about changes to library systems. That's been a hot topic as of lately. And then we're going to open it up to your questions. We've had a few submitted ahead of time on the website form, which is great, and we'll tackle those. And then if you have questions right now, we will tackle those as well. So not really sure how this is all going to pan out. We're trying this out. It's something new. It's going to, I think, develop a little organically and on the fly, and we'll see how it goes. So we're going to start with Krista Ross, and she's going to talk about the impact of trustees in Wisconsin libraries. And Krista, I'm going to go ahead and give you the screen.
Okay, thank you. I hope you all can hear me. Hello out there in library land. I would volunteer. Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You'll just want to put your slideshow and you're in slideshow mode.
I thought I had. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There we go. Got that out of the way. Now everything should be smooth sailing. When I was thinking about the positive impact of trustees on libraries, I realized I could fill a book with that. But as I was thinking, it really came down to 3 overall themes: connection, direction, and protection. And we're going to start today with connection. I'm guessing that in addition to being a library trustee, you're also involved in your community. You may be part of the business community, you may be part of the school community, you may be a member of a service group, or you may be the representative from the municipal government. As that, you act as a connector between the library and those other roles that you play in your life. And so you have a chance to hear about concerns and wishes that members of the community have for library services, usually in a very informal way. And while you're gathering that feedback, you also have the opportunity then to raise the awareness of the library in very casual situations. You have an opportunity to share what the library does to a group that maybe doesn't realize that their mission and the library's mission have some overlap. The next way that you have an impact on library is through direction. The Library Board of Trustees, you're a policy-making group, so you provide the framework or the guidelines that define library services for your community. You also have a huge role in planning for the library's future services. You're serving a diverse community, the library world is changing and growing, and those of us that are librarians, part of the reason why we are librarians is because we like to help. And many of us are enthusiastic about what libraries can be in the future, and so sometimes it's hard for us to say no. So through the planning process, you can help us define what we're going to spend our very limited resources and staffing riffing on to help us focus those library services so that we can do the things that our community really needs us to do and is appropriate for us and do it well, instead of trying to do a lot of other things, frankly, not very well. And the last thing is protection, and I thought it was so great that this year's summer library program was Heroes, because you all are heroes too, community heroes. So that's why we have Captain America up there. You actually play a really important role in your community, and that is to defend the right of each citizen to have access to the information that he or she needs to thrive and to contribute to society. So that means you may have to address challenges to materials or programs in the library. Also, as trustees, you play a really important role in insulating the library from local politics. We all know that through change, one party or the other party or a mixture of parties are in control, and by being a citizen board, you actually focus on library services and don't necessarily get pulled into local politics. And that is so important because we know that one of the key foundations of a democracy is an informed citizenry. And so that's a really important role that I'm not sure all of us, or if you've been a trustee, that you realize that you play. So that's what I have for you today. So, Jamie?
Great. Thank you so much, Krista. We're going to turn it over to Mark, and I'm going to take the screen back. And Mark is going to talk about Chapter 43 and how that affects libraries. So, Mark, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. It's an interesting question. You know, I thought about this, and first, I think the question is, just so you know, what is Chapter 43? A lot of you probably have never heard about it. And it's a section in state statutes. The state statutes are numbered, and you can see the main page for Chapter 43 on your screen right now. It's that section of the statutes that deals with library boards, libraries, library systems. And it governs the main points are library board appointments, responsibilities, authorities, county reimbursements, and county relations with municipal libraries. Public library systems, guidance for their services, organization, governance, and membership requirements for the library system, for the libraries in their system. But when Jamie gave me this question, she said, how does Chapter 3 most affect public libraries? And that I really had to think about that. And I thought, finally I decided, well, what questions, what issues do I get the most questions on relating to Chapter 43? And I decided I would try to at least focus on that a little bit, and that's on the board's powers and duties. There are a lot of questions out there about what powers, what authority the library board has. And a lot of those come from your municipal clerks, administrators, because library boards are rather anomalous in Wisconsin because you have a great deal of authority, of autonomy, that I'm not sure if any other appointed board has. Because you have sole, or as the statute says, exclusive control of the expenditure of library funds. You have exclusive charge control custody of lands, buildings, money, other property that the municipality has acquired for library service. And you have personnel authority beyond what I think any other appointed board has, in that you hire the director, you decide on other staff duties and compensation, you You are not required to get this approved by your municipal board or the personnel committee. So it's the extent of library board authority. I think that is how Chapter 43 most affects public libraries. And I guess I will leave it at that for now, and if you have further questions, when we get to the question and answer, I can talk more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We're going to turn it over now to John Thompson, and he's going to talk about changes we might be seeing in the future of library systems, or possible future changes, and what that might mean for systems and for our libraries in those systems. So John, whenever you're ready.
All right. As Jamie had mentioned in the introduction, there has been a lot of discussion about library systems and the futures of library systems. So we've had conversations as system directors at various meetings. There was some discussion at the state legislature about doing a lean study. And so some of that process has evolved in some conversations about systems in Wisconsin. Just for a little bit of background, there are 17 library systems in Wisconsin that represent different sizes and geographical regions. They range in size from 1 county to up to 10 counties. And there may be as few as 2 or 3 public libraries within a system, all the way up to 54 service units. So the size and scope of the systems varies greatly. Library systems are a state-funded organization that support public libraries. It is not a mandate that a public library be part of a system, but currently all the public libraries in Wisconsin are members of one of the 17 library systems. Each of the systems have their own boards, and depending on the size of the system, the size of the system board can change. For example, our system has 10 counties. Our board consists of 20 appointed members. So we have representatives from each of the 10 counties. So again, that's varied within locations. Library systems really began back in the 1970s, before we had all the sharing via the online catalogs that we do now, before computers were in place, really. So lots of things have changed in libraries. The thing that really hasn't changed over that period of time is state statute that govern library systems. System services are all mandated by statute, that Chapter 43 that Mark was talking about, and each individual system has to fulfill each one of those mandated services, but we as systems get to decide how extensively we provide those services. For public libraries to be part of a system, they need to be open a certain number of hours, be funded by a municipality of some sort, and then employ a certified library director and things like that. But those are pretty minimal requirements for public libraries. One of the things that library systems recently, when I speak recently, would be the last 10 or 20 years, that really have become known for are the shared automation systems. For library systems, those systems are really a way that we share resources, which is one of the mandates that systems have to provide. For the local libraries, they're really a checkout system, a circulation system for the libraries, which is not really a mandated system service. So they've evolved, and most libraries view that sharing of resources and that circulation system as one of the vital functions of a library system. But we as systems are not necessarily required to provide that level of service. Some of the things that most of our library systems do offer are support for children's services, whether it's for summer reading programs or things like that to support early literacy. Support of those types of services, again, are not mandated by the state. But if we as systems decide, well, we can't support that anymore, short of closing down the automation system, that would probably be the second most thing that people would be upset about. The other thing that's been driving some of this conversation for system changes is the fact that the money for library systems has not changed in the last 4 or 5 years. We had a 10% cut, and then we've been flat funded ever since. So we really are trying to figure out how best to use the resources we have as systems and what we need to do to move forward. Like I mentioned, there was a discussion at the legislative level, not the current budget cycle, but the previous budget cycle, about having the Department of Administration do a lean study of library systems. The governor vetoed that provision, but the Department of Public Instruction, the division for libraries component, thought that some sort of lean study was important, so they did conduct a lean study with a group of library system staff and member libraries as part of that lean study. The system directors and the resource libraries had also completed a report looking at some recommendations to improve services as well. So those two studies were really providing framework for the future of what we might have for some conversations. And right now at the DPI level, Department of Public Instruction level, they are appointing a steering committee to look at system redesign. The committee members know who they are at this point, but they haven't had an official announcement yet, and that should be coming out sometime in the next few weeks, hopefully. They're waiting to get approval to send the letters out, but that committee that will kind of oversee the system redesign process will consist of representatives from library systems, resource libraries, and public libraries within Wisconsin, and they will represent the various sizes and regions of the state. And then they will work on creating some work groups to study different things that will include how continuing education is provided, how delivery is handled in the state, how automation networks may be created in the future, how we share materials across systems, looking at ways that we can use technology to enhance the services that we may provide. What systems look like in the future, we don't have a clear picture of what that will be. There may be more regionalization of certain services, and there may be more statewide application of services. Sizes and boundaries of systems may change, but the intent of the redesign work built on those two other reports is to improve services to member libraries, to try to create a uniform level of service for public libraries across the state. And as the process moves forward, they will be seeking input from the library community. The meeting information will be out there for people to see what's going on. There is a system redesign website out there that will have the documents posted to it. Some of the work that SIRLA study committee did, the system directors, and the Lean Study Committee, that information is already out there. And as soon as the committee is appointed, that information will be out there as well. So there will be changes. The library community has, seen other things going on. There's talk of the UW two-year campuses and the tech colleges combining. Already some of the administration at the two-year campuses are being consolidated, so change will have to occur. We want to make sure as systems that we are providing the services that our member libraries need. So while there will be some changes, the intent is to make service better. And that's what I have for right now, Jamie.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you, Krista and Mark, as well, for giving us some highlights on those very important topics. Now we open it up to you. What are your questions about the things that were just discussed, or do you have another burning question? Are you a new trustee who is confused about certain things? If you are, this is the time to ask it. We will take anything. You know, the other sessions this week have been by speakers not from Wisconsin, and we really wanted today to be about issues specifically for Wisconsin libraries. So we did receive a few questions that were submitted by the website. We had that on our trustee website, and one of those was, I'm interested in the idea of a board evaluating itself. Could you give us a few steps on how we could initiate this? And I believe Krista was interested in tackling this question. So Krista.
Hi, thanks. I think board evaluations is a very useful process, so here's just some suggestions. The first place I would start would be to review your bylaws. You all should have bylaws. You are a self-governing body, so your bylaws are the rules for how you operate, and maybe you've never seen them. If you've never seen them, you definitely need to find them. Make sure that you're operating as you say you're going to. Make sure that the number of meetings that you're having is what you're having. If not, maybe they need to be updated. The other thing is there's a wonderful resource, the Trustee Essentials, that talk about issues related to trustee responsibilities and roles. You may want to go through one of two of those per meeting, or assign them to each board member to come and talk about. But think about, here's what the Trustee Essential says on the library and personnel, or the board and finances. How close are we in practice to what the Essential is recommending? And then look for areas of improvement. And once you've went through that process and gathered all that homework, start looking at overall goals and set some goals for yourself for the coming year, and then evaluate how you're doing. But I think it's important that you start with the research and determine where you are with your own rules and with the guidelines from the state for what trustees should be doing.
Thank you, Krista. Mark or John, do you have anything to add to that question?
No, I think Krista covered it very well.
Okay. Anything, John?
I think it's important for the board to realize that they're working together as a team, and so when they're evaluating themselves as a board, they need to look at the big picture and not just focus on individuals that maybe never show up for a meeting or may not be prepared. You want to keep it looking at the board as a whole, as a unit working together.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and thank you for the question that was submitted. Another question that came in was in regards to open meeting laws. Someone asked, when are we allowed to go into closed session, and how do we give a notice for when we have municipal meetings? Mark and or John, would you like to tackle that question?
Sure, I can start, and John can chime in. The presumption in Wisconsin in the law is that most meetings are open to members of the public, to the media, to anyone who wants to be there. But there are particular times when it is allowed to go into closed session. Many of those, or most of those, that a library board would be dealing with is personnel issues. Hiring someone, hiring a director, setting pay rates, if there's a disciplinary issue going on, that sort of thing. And the most important thing to remember there is that you can go into closed session if you are discussing a particular person. You're deciding the directors, what are we going to pay the director?
Mark, could you say that again? Did you say you can go into closed session when you are deciding what to pay your library director?
Yes, for a particular, when you're discussing a particular person.
Okay, you can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But if you are discussing things generally, you have to be in open session. And say you are talking about library salaries overall, are we going to give the staff an across-the-board cost of living increase? And if so, how much? That's done in open session. It's when you are discussing, say you're in the process of hiring a new director, or you're doing a director evaluation and you decide, okay, this is how the director has been doing, what kind of raise do we give this year? That you're talking about a particular person, so that may be done in closed session.
One of the follow-up questions that came into that is, what if you are considering a layoff of a category of employee?
I would say if you are discussing a category, you know, we have 3 people in the library assistant position, we need to lay one off. That would be done in open session.
Okay.
Because you're not discussing a particular person. You would go into, or you could go into closed session when the director comes and says, I am recommending, out of these 3 people, I'm recommending we lay off this person for these reasons. And that's something you could probably do in closed session.
So, Mark, another follow-up question to that. Are the closed sessions minutes shared with the entire board or only the committee?
If it's a committee that's in closed session, I would think those would be shared with the entire board, because a committee cannot, even in closed session, cannot exclude members of its parent body. So say, for example, the library board has a personnel committee that is meeting in closed session. Any member of the library board is entitled to attend that, even if they're not on the personnel committee.
Okay.
Also, I would note that once the overriding reason for the closed session is passed, those minutes are part of the open record.
Okay.
Say again, for example, you're discussing a disciplinary action. While that action is going on, any minutes could be kept confidential. Once the issue has been resolved, the matter is closed, and the person has or hasn't been disciplined, those minutes become part of the open record for anyone to look at, just as your minutes of your regular library board are.
Mark, does there have to be minutes for a closed session?
Yes.
Okay.
There has to be minutes for every session of the library board or a library board committee. You have to keep minutes. Yes.
Okay. John, was there anything, I'll pull up my notes back up on the screen, was there anything you wanted to add to what Mark said?
One of the things that Mark kept emphasizing was that you may go into closed session. There is no requirement that you do go into closed session. So if you want to talk about the director's evaluation in open session, you can do that. You can do whatever you want to in open session. You just need to be careful if you're going to get into, specific work history or specific personal history of an individual, that there may be repercussions if you talk about some of that in open session. The other piece in terms of the library director, if the library board were to start the process of termination of the library director, they can do that in closed session, but if the library director says, well, I want that in open session, it has to be done in open session. That termination piece, the statute does allow for the person being terminated to have that be part of open session. So be mindful of that relationship with the library director and the library board. If things get so strained, it may be more of a political situation where the library director brings all their friends in to support them and the board gets a lot of political backlash from that. So it doesn't happen very often specifically in Wisconsin, but it has happened in some situations, and it can make a pretty nasty public discussion.
Yes.
All right. Well, on that, yes.
Jamie, there was a second part to the question that I was going to talk about when I started talking about closed session.
Yes, that was on how do we give notice for municipal meetings.
Yes. If anytime the library board is getting together for library business, you need to post a notice that you are meeting. And it doesn't matter whether it's an actual meeting or, for example, it's a meeting of your municipal board and the entire library board plans on attending. You need to notice that as a meeting of the library board. And what I recommend to our directors, I say, put it out, say something like the library board will be attending the meeting of the city council on whatever date, time, and place. No other business will be transacted, or the library board will not transact its own business.
Okay, thank you. Another follow-up question came in, and this will be the last one on open records for now, or open meetings for now. And Mark or John, if you could answer this one. It is, a trustee recommended that I should create a new email account for all of my library correspondence because of the open records law. Do I need to do that, or can I just use my personal email?
This is John. I'll try to tackle this one. You don't need to create a new email account. You can certainly use your personal email, but any library business that's conducted via email, which should be none other than informational purposes, and I'll explain that in a minute, would be subject to an open records request. So they would then request access to files from your personal email regarding that issue, and you need to retain those emails because they are a public document. Library boards in general should not be, it's not permissible for library board members to be conducting library business via email. That creating a quorum or a what they call a walking quorum, where you have an email conversation or a general conversation with one member and then another member and then another member, creates a quorum. So having an email discussion with board members would be a violation of the open meeting law. So really for the library board email, it really should be used to send out the library board agenda and all the documents that are associated with the agenda. There should be no discussions or any other types of stuff going on within email. So you certainly can continue to use your personal email. It's because you're really only receiving library board documents, which somebody else would also be the records custodian of those as well.
I'd like to add, just to clarify a little bit, that you as a trustee can certainly have an email conversation with your library director about any library issues. Those would be part of the public record, but it does not constitute a meeting. And you could even have a one-on-one email or other conversation with another trustee. It's when you get multiple trustees involved and each one making comments or offering an opinion that you have a problem. So that is what you need to worry about, is not the one-on-one discussions, but discussions that are bringing in multiple people.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, we're actually going to go back to the board evaluating itself. A question came in, great tips for evaluating, but shouldn't someone else be evaluating us, like an outside party maybe? Krista, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's perfectly appropriate to include, perhaps as part of the process, maybe someone, a system staff member, the system director, or whomever handles the consulting for library trustees for your system. I think that's perfectly appropriate. I think there is value, though, for the board itself to go through and not just read a report about who they are, but go through the process of discovering who they are. But I think it's perfectly okay for a system person or an outsider. You just want to make sure that they're very familiar with how boards should be operating and that they are seen as someone who is completely neutral, you know, who isn't advocating for something for the library director or the trustees, or, you know, that it's a good evaluation. So. Okay.
Thank you, Krista. There was a question that came in at the beginning, and we need a little bit more information to answer this better. And the question is, our finance director is planning to make our library a fund. How might this affect or change our financial situation? If you are the person who submitted this and are still listening, could you elaborate a little bit more on that in the chat box, and then we can tackle that question a little bit better. We'll come back to that. Now we're gonna talk about a different question, and this one is, my question has to do with what other businesses call succession planning. Do libraries engage in future personnel planning? For example, having someone in mind for the next library director. Do they do that always? Do they do it sometimes? Never? And how do they do it? Do one of you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I'll start a little bit here. I don't know. In most cases, libraries do not do that formally. I have known one or two cases where a person was hired in a assistant director type position with the understanding or the knowledge that the director was planning on retiring sometime next year or whatever, and that the plan was that they would ascend to that position. But I think it's important that libraries do keep in mind, or its trustees keep in mind, what do we do when our director leaves? Because in a good case, your director will say, hey, I'm retiring in 6 months or next year, whatever it may be. But you could have a director give a 2-week notice. You could have we had one unfortunate circumstance where a director died very unexpectedly and suddenly with no inkling that they were unwell. So these things can happen. I think it's important that there be the records, the library records be in good shape so that someone else can come in and knows, okay, here are the policies. Here is who we call when the boiler doesn't start up. Here is how we handle all these ongoing things, that it not just be kept in the director's head, that it be written down.
Great. Thank you, Mark. We'll move on to another question. Could libraries statewide save money by having a combined technology platform and common software system? Who wants to lead with that?
This is John. I'm assuming when it may be the statewide circulation system versus versus a statewide software platform where everybody's using Microsoft Office or whatever. The discussion at the system redesign level will look at how best to share resources across libraries, which would include either updating how WSCAT works or how the shared systems talk to each other, or there has been some discussion whether or not one statewide automation system is possible. And all of those kinds of things will be talked about, and whether or not it saves money, that's something that will have to be evaluated, not only in terms of the software cost, but the staff cost to manage a system like that. So it's possible, and they're certainly also going to look at other ways that technology can be shared, servers and things like that, that even just for email platforms that might save libraries and systems money. So it will be part of that system redesigns conversation.
Great. Thank you, John. Okay, we're going to go back to the question I just mentioned. I'll repeat it again and elaborate with our new information. So it is, our finance director is planning to make our library a fund. How might this affect or change our financial situation? We have always been just a part of the city's general budget, but we will become our own fund. The finance director is advocating for this because it makes the revenue and the expenditures very transparent. And as I understand it, we will have non-lapsing funds. Conversely, we will have to borrow from the general fund. I like this idea of transparency, but I need to know if there's anything we should be aware of. Does that help, panel?
This is Mark, and it sounds as if this is just a different way of how the city will be handling their accounting, how they'll record it. I don't see that this would affect the library board's control of library expenditures and of the library money. At least from what you've said, I think it's just a different way of keeping the books.
Okay. John or Krista, do you want to add to that? Do you have anything to add to that?
I'm just wondering, because they use the term non-lapsing, if that may mean, and again, I am not an accountant, I am not an auditor, just that it's like a cash account. When I used to be a library director, our county funds went into what our city called a fund or a cash account, meaning that there was no expiration for that money. It just kept rolling over because the county funds couldn't be transferred into the general fund. They had to stay together. So I basically had access January 1st. I could be spending the money that was still in that account. And I wonder if that's what that non-lapsing means, is that perhaps if you don't spend all of your 2015 money, it's just going to sit there and be available to you. I don't know, though. I'm just wondering if that isn't kind of what they're doing by separating you from the general fund. Maybe you get your carryover already, but I'm wondering. That's a good question, but
okay,
it's just a step.
Okay, Krista, while I have you here, another question came in that I thought you would be good to answer, and that is, what resources do you recommend to arm trustees with information to become the strongest possible local advocates for their library? The most richest, up-to-date resources.
I think that it's really important that that a director is communicating with you all the time about what's going on in the library. My goal when I was, and even as a system director, is that I never want my trustee to get caught on the street and have a question asked about the library that they couldn't answer. So you need to be communicating. I know that board meetings can often be a lot of decision making, but there also needs to be some information sharing. I also think it's important that your board you as board members are exposed to the larger library world. So make sure that they're paying attention to the Wisconsin for Libraries, the new blog by the state, so that they get exposed to ideas that are happening at the state level. Even reports, the Aspen report that has come out about redefining the library, the future of the library. Make sure that you're exposing them to that they're reading about that, so that they understand what's happening in the larger world of libraries, and even have that conversation with them. Read these reports that are out there and talk about, well, maybe you're a small library and you can't do everything in that report, but eventually all of that stuff that's very high level filters down, and what is innovative today becomes standard library services. So make sure that you're reading and talking and discussing and keeping them informed, and making sure that they're paying a lot of attention to that. I think that that's the best way to keep them informed, so that they can speak to the larger library world and how their library fits in with it. And going to any trainings from the systems, or wherever, WLA, join the Wisconsin Library Association, be a member of the division for the Wisconsin Library Trustees and Friends. If you can, go to the day that's for trustees, which is generally Thursday. It's coming up in the first week of November. It's in Middleton. I don't know how close that is for some of you, but for some of you it's not much of a drive. But these are all going to be ways for you to get more exposure to what's going on in the library world, and then be able to talk about it.
Krista, what was the blog that you mentioned?
Wisconsin for WI for Libraries. Somebody help me. Is that what the new what the DPI is putting out now instead of the Channel Weekly? There used to be the Channel Weekly.
I think so. Jean, okay. If you could look that up and post that to the board, that would be awesome. Thank you. She's so quick. There she goes. I knew she would. She'd be all over it. Awesome.
Yay, Jean.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Krista. Okay, next question, and this can be for any of you who want to tackle this one. How do you handle a friends group that appears to be working counter to the directions of the board? Anyone?
This is John. I'll try to tackle it. I think.
Thanks, John.
part of the issue is a friends group that's established as a 501c3 is an independent organization. They are intended to be supportive of the library. That's generally why friends groups are set up. So if there is a conflict between the library and the friends group, I think there has to be an open and honest conversation between the two groups to say what is the concern that the Friends is having with the library. There may be issues where people are not liking the policies that the library or the services that the library have implemented, and I think it needs to be clearly stated to the Friends group that the library board is the governing body of the library, and it's their responsibility to set policy, set the services, set the budget, and the Friends group is there to help support the library's mission in the community. And it's important that there is some ongoing conversations, whether the library director attends Friends meetings as a ad hoc member of the group, or if there's a representative from the library board. It's also could be helpful for the Friends to make a report at the library board meeting about the activities of Friends, and then take some of the information gathered back from the library board to the Friends group as well. A lot of times it's personalities that get in the way, and it may require the change in leadership in the Friends before something really changes. So there, library supporters that don't necessarily agree with the direction that the Friends are taking may need to step up into a leadership role and help refocus what the Friends are doing.
Mark or Krista, do you have anything you want to add? I thought John covered that very well, but I just wanted to see. And if not, that is fine. We can move on to our next question. And that is, what types of committees and how many committees does an average Wisconsin library board have? And can you place expectations on trustees to be on at least one committee?
I guess I can start this. I would say, to answer your second question, yes, I think there should be expectations for library trustees, and I recommend actually writing up you might call it a job description for potential trustees, saying, we meet monthly at this time and place. We expect you to attend and participate in meetings. We expect you to participate in library committee meetings. And that's nice for people that you're asking to be a trustee or that might be volunteering. They know ahead of time what's involved, so they're not surprised when they get told, oh, you've got to do this and this. Regarding committees, sometimes I think we tend to be over-committed. You probably want a personnel committee to handle if there's need for hiring the director, any sort of disciplinary issues. You might want a finance committee for the budget, though not every board does. And probably an executive committee, which might just be your officers, that's empowered to make quick decisions in case of an emergency. I don't know that you need a lot of other standing committees or a lot of if something comes up, a lot of times you will set an ad hoc committee for building or a director search committee or something like that.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Krista or John, anything you want to add to that? And if not, that is fine. We are just about out of time. Wow, this went really quickly. I'm going to throw our panelists on the spot. And I didn't tell them I was going to do this ahead of time. And what I would like to know from each of you, and we'll start with Krista. We'll go in our same order, Krista, Mark, John. And I'm I want you to keep this brief because I think that it's harder to do that. What would you say in 10 words or fewer? What would you say are the best attributes or the best qualities to have in a public library trustee? So I know I'm putting you on the spot. Krista, we'll start with you. What do you think?
Let's see. I want to say enthusiasm and passion for libraries. That's it.
Great. Mark.
Yeah, passionate about the library was my first thought as well. I would say also being willing to work in a group with the other trustees and being willing sometimes to, I may think that the library should go in this direction and this would be a great service. But willing to let the majority decide without having hard feelings or continuing to carry on arguing for my vision when the board has decided no.
Okay, John.
Okay, well prepared, open-minded, thoughtful, willing to discuss, and connected to the community.
Okay, I might not get all of those down, but those were excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm going to bring up the trustee.
Can I add one more?
Sure.
Jamie?
Yes.
Can I add one more? Being willing to speak up in the meetings. I've too often seen where someone will sit in the meeting and keep their mouth shut, and then when the meeting's done with, they start objecting or they're very unhappy. If you want to say something or if you have an opinion, speak up in the meeting.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Well, thank you again, Krista, Mark, and John, for being part of this panel this afternoon. I want to thank all of you for joining us. It's Friday. It's nice out, so the fact that you're sitting here inside or sitting wherever you are listening to a presentation, it means a lot. So we thank you for your participation and for your great questions. I think most of you would agree that it has been a very information-filled week, and our presenters and panelists definitely gave us a lot to think about. Just a reminder, it's up on your screen right now. The links to any of the recordings from the week, the slides, the handouts that you saw are all on the website. It's wistrusteetraining.com under recordings where you see it right now. Everything has been up. I get it up pretty quickly. We will have the recording from today up probably within the next hour or so. So with that said, I hope you all have a great weekend and hope that you all enjoyed Wisconsin Trustee Training Week in 2015. Thank you so much for being part of this. So long.